Dr. Tom Baker stood on stage, shaking as he held his Best Doctor of the Year award. The glass trophy shone brightly under the lights of the big hotel room. At 45 years old, with gray hair and soft brown eyes, he looked like the perfect small-town doctor. The host's voice filled the room. We honor him for helping patients with long-lasting pain. In our town, Tom felt sweat running down his back under his new suit. In the crowd, his wife Mary smiled proudly, while their teenage daughter Lisa recorded everything on her phone. Behind them sat Tom's elderly mother Rose, wiping tears of joy from her eyes. She had raised him alone, working 3 jobs to put him through medical school. Next to Rose sat Tom's younger brother Steve, a local high school teacher who had always lived in Tom's shadow. Nobody knew that Steve had recently discovered a strange package in Tom's garage, one that made him start asking questions he was afraid to answer. 20 years ago, Tom had opened his doctor's office with nothing but school loans and a real wish to help sick people. His small office in the quiet town of Pine Grove had grown into a big 3-floor medical building, treating hundreds of people with pain problems. The local newspaper called him a miracle worker. Parents thanked him for helping their children who got hurt playing sports. Old people blessed him for making their joint pain better. Nobody asked why his parking lot was always full, even at strange times, or why some patients drove 5 states away to see him. What made Tom different was his special treatment room, room 13, at the end of a quiet hallway. He told everyone it was for patients who needed extra privacy, but only his trusted nurse, Jenny Kim, knew what really happened there. Jenny had worked with Tom for 15 years, keeping his secrets and helping him build his empire. But last week, she had found something in room 13 that made her blood run cold. A hidden camera and a list of names, some crossed out in red ink. That night, as Tom gave his speech about helping people in pain, police detective Jane Lee sat in her dark office 200 miles away, putting another picture on her wall. The photo showed Tom shaking hands with a known drug seller outside an old warehouse. She had been watching him for months, but something was strange. How did a well-liked doctor with no criminal record become the leader of what looked like the biggest illegal pain pill business on the East Coast? What Detective Lee didn't know was that her own partner, Detective Mike Wilson, had been taking envelopes full of cash from Tom's brother Steve every month. Mike had his own secrets, a gambling debt, and a sick wife who needed expensive medicine. But today, Mike's conscience was finally winning. In his desk drawer lay a USB drive with enough evidence to put both Tom and himself in jail for life. Tom finished his speech to loud clapping, but he barely heard it. His phone had just buzzed with a message. Patient in room 4, not breathing, emergency team helping now. His stomach felt like ice. It was Amy White, a 19-year-old college student. He had been treating for a small back injury. She wasn't supposed to be at the clinic today. She wasn't supposed to have that many pills. Someone had made a big mistake, and in his world, mistakes could kill people. What Tom didn't know was that Amy White was actually Kate Martinez, a young undercover agent who had spent the last 6 months building trust with Tom's team. She had almost gathered enough evidence when something went terribly wrong. Someone in Tom's organization had discovered her real identity, but it wasn't Tom who had ordered her to be silenced. As Tom rushed out of the hotel room, making up a story about an emergency, he didn't see the man in the corner taking pictures. This man was Bobby Chen, Jenny's cousin, who worked as a janitor in Tom's clinic. Bobby had been secretly collecting evidence for months, hoping to save his own son, who had become addicted to Tom's pills. He also didn't notice the plain brown envelope being slipped under his office door back at his clinic. Inside was one photo, Tom in his basement counting room, taken through a window he thought nobody could see through, with a note that said, "We need to talk about Amy." The note wasn't from the police or from any drug gang. It was from Sarah White, a mother who had lost her real daughter, the real Amy, to Tom's pills 3 years ago. She had spent every day since then planning her revenge, working her way into Tom's organization as a cleaning lady, gathering evidence, and waiting for the perfect moment. Tonight, everything would change. The night was just beginning, and Tom knew that all his lies were starting to fall apart. What he didn't know was that Amy White wasn't really unconscious in his clinic. In fact, Amy White didn't even exist, at least not this one. The trap had been set, and he had just walked right into it. But the real question wasn't who had set the trap. It was who was actually controlling all the players in this deadly game. Tom's car sped through the dark streets of Pine Grove, his award forgotten in the back seat. His phone rang. It was Mary, worried about his sudden departure. "Everything's fine," he lied, his voice steady from years of practice. "Just a patient emergency." But Mary heard something different in his voice this time. After 20 years of marriage, she knew when Tom was lying. What he didn't know was that she had already hired a private detective. Last month, after finding a strange key and a burner phone in his gym bag. At the clinic, the emergency lights were flashing. Tom rushed past the front desk, where Rita, the night receptionist, sat nervously. Rita had worked there for 5 years, but tonight was different. She had finally opened the mysterious envelope that had been left in her desk drawer, with instructions to open it only if something happened to Amy White. Inside, she found photos of her teenage son buying pills behind the school. Pills that came from Dr. Baker's clinic. Tom ran to room 4, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. But when he opened the door, the room was empty. No Amy White, no emergency team, only a small red light blinking from something in the corner. A camera. His heart stopped when he noticed a laptop on the examination table, its screen showing a live video feed of his basement counting room. Next to it lay a cell phone, and as he watched, it lit up with a message. "Look behind you." Detective Jane Lee was already on her way to Pine Grove, but she wasn't alone. In her passenger seat sat David Chen, a former patient of Tom's who had lost everything to addiction. What Jane didn't know was that David wasn't just a witness. He was Bobby Chen's brother, and together they had been building a case against Tom for years. But their plan wasn't just about justice. It was about the $5 million in drug money that they knew Tom had hidden somewhere in the clinic. Meanwhile, in room 13, Jenny Kim stood frozen, staring at her computer screen. She had just discovered that every patient file in room 13 was connected to a larger network, one that reached hospitals in 12 states. The names, the prescriptions, the deaths, it was all part of something much bigger than Tom's illegal business. But before she could dig deeper, her screen went black, replaced by a single message. "Your daughter's dance recital starts in 30 minutes. Choose wisely." Back in the hotel, Steve Baker made his way to the parking lot, clutching a USB drive in his pocket. He had finally decided to turn his brother in, but guilt wasn't his only motivation. Steve had discovered that his brother was just a middleman. The real boss was someone much closer to home. As he reached for his car door, he heard a familiar voice. "Going somewhere, little brother?" It was Rose, their mother, standing in the shadows. The same Rose who had worked 3 jobs to put Tom through medical school. The same Rose who had been running drug operations in 3 states long before Tom even became a doctor. In her dark office, Detective Mike Wilson's wife Susan sat alone, staring at a piece of paper. It wasn't just any paper. It was a list of every patient who had died at Tom's clinic. And at the top was her own sister's name. Mike had been accepting bribes to protect the man who had killed his sister-in-law. Tonight, Susan had a choice to make, and the loaded gun in her purse made that choice very clear. Sarah White, disguised as a cleaning lady, watched from around the corner as Tom discovered the empty room 4. Her plan was working perfectly until she saw something unexpected. Jenny Kim rushing down the hall with a file she recognized. It was the same file Sarah had buried with her daughter 3 years ago. Suddenly, her simple revenge plan became much more complicated. Tom's phone buzzed again. This time it was a video, security footage from his own basement counting room, taken an hour ago. But it wasn't the usual scene of money and drugs. Instead, he watched in horror as Mary, his wife, entered the code to his secret safe and removed something. The next message made his blood run cold. Your wife knows everything, but what she doesn't know might kill her. As rain began to fall over Pine Grove, 12 different people moved through the night, each carrying a piece of a puzzle that nobody fully understood. But in room 13, behind a hidden panel that even Tom didn't know about, a computer quietly uploaded every dirty secret to a server somewhere far away. And in exactly 1 hour, those secrets would be sent to every news outlet in the country. Unless someone could stop it. The rain grew heavier as Tom rushed down to his basement counting room, his shoes leaving wet marks on the stairs. The security code didn't work. Someone had changed it. Through the small window in the door, he could see his safe was open and empty. 20 years of secrets gone, but something else caught his eye. An old wheelchair sat in the corner, one he hadn't seen in years. It belonged to Annie Johnson, his first patient, who died mysteriously 15 years ago. Mary Baker wasn't actually at home, like Tom thought. She sat in a small coffee shop across town with Linda Johnson, Annie's daughter. Your husband didn't just kill my mother, Linda said, sliding a thick folder across the table. She was patient 0. The folder contained insurance papers showing that Annie's death was part of a test, the beginning of something much bigger than a simple drug operation. In room 13, Jenny Kim's hand shook as she tried calling her daughter's dance school. No answer. The school should have been full of parents and children for the recital. Instead, the building sat dark and empty. A new message popped up on her computer. Your daughter is safe, for now. The question is, are Dr. Baker's other secrets safe with you? Below the message was a video feed of her daughter, sleeping peacefully in what looked like a hospital room. Detective Jane Lee and David Chen pulled into the clinic's parking lot just as Steve Baker was arriving. None of them noticed the old cleaning lady, Sarah White, slipping out through the back door carrying something wrapped in a white doctor's coat. But Sarah had seen them, and more importantly, she'd seen the red laser dot from a sniper rifle dancing across David Chen's back. From her years of planning, she knew there were 3 snipers watching the clinic tonight. What she didn't know was that one of them was her own brother. Up in her office, Rita, the receptionist, was making the hardest phone call of her life. Mom, remember when Dad died in Dr. Baker's clinic last year? It wasn't an accident. Her father had been the clinic's maintenance man, and he'd discovered something in the air vents, something that explained why certain patients in room 13 never got better, no matter what treatment they received. Rose Baker sat in her car, watching the clinic through binoculars. Her phone showed live feeds from cameras hidden throughout the building. She hadn't worked 3 jobs just to put Tom through medical school. Those jobs had been covers for building her network. But tonight, something was wrong. The cameras were showing the same images from an hour ago, playing on a loop. Someone had hacked her system. Detective Mike Wilson's wife, Susan, wasn't home anymore. She was in the air vents above room 13, crawling toward the hidden server room that her sister had told her about before she died. The gun in her pocket kept banging against the metal vent, but it didn't matter anymore. The noise would be covered by the storm. Below her, she could hear Jenny Kim crying about her missing daughter. Susan knew the girl was safe because she had arranged her protection herself. Tom finally got his basement door open, using an old key he'd kept hidden. But the room beyond wasn't his counting room anymore. The walls were covered with photos, hundreds of them. Every patient who had died, every family torn apart, every life destroyed. In the center was a large computer screen showing a countdown. 45 minutes until every major news station would receive the full story. But it wasn't just about the drugs. The photos showed something worse. Birth dates that didn't match, death certificates with impossible times, and insurance payments that went to accounts opened by dead people. Outside in the parking lot, David Chen answered a call from his brother Bobby. "Don't trust Detective Lee," Bobby whispered. "She's not really a DEA agent. She's..." The call cut off as a gunshot echoed through the night. But the shot hadn't come from any of the snipers. It had come from inside the clinic, from room 13. Sarah White unwrapped the package she'd taken from the clinic. Inside wasn't evidence or drugs or money. It was a small diary, written by her daughter, the real Amy, in the weeks before she died. The last entry read, "Mom, if you're reading this, Dr. Baker isn't the one who killed me. It was..." The rest of the page was missing. Above her, thunder cracked, and in that flash of lightning, she saw someone standing in front of her car. It was Rose Baker, holding the missing page. Inside the clinic, Tom reached for his phone to call Mary, but he stopped when he saw the last photo on the wall. It showed him as a young medical student, standing next to his mother, Rose, and a man he'd never seen before. The man's face was circled in red, and below it was written, "Patient 0 wasn't Annie Johnson. It was you, Tom. Check your own blood test from last month." The storm grew stronger, and in 45 minutes, everyone's lies would come crashing down. But the real truth was still hiding, scattered among 12 people who thought they knew the whole story. None of them realized they were all just pieces in a game that had started long before Tom Baker ever became a doctor. Tom's hands trembled as he opened his own medical file. The blood test results made no sense. His DNA showed patterns of experimental gene therapy dating back 30 years, long before he was even a doctor. At the bottom of the file was a sticky note in his mother's handwriting. "I'm sorry I had to use you, son, but you were the perfect carrier." Meanwhile, in the coffee shop, Linda Johnson pulled out a second file. "Your husband isn't just dealing drugs, Mrs. Baker," she whispered to Mary. "The pills are just a cover. Each prescription contains tiny amounts of an experimental drug. The addicts are just test subjects." Mary's face went white as Linda showed her photos of bizarre DNA mutations in patient blood samples. She recognized one name immediately. Her daughter Lisa had been getting headache pills from Tom's clinic for the past year. Above room 13, Susan Wilson froze in the air vent. Through a crack, she saw Jenny Kim holding a gun. But Jenny wasn't alone. Rita, the receptionist, stood in front of her, holding up a phone showing a live video feed. On the screen, Jenny's daughter sat in what looked like a hospital room, but Susan recognized the wallpaper. It was from her own basement. She had thought she was protecting the girl, but someone else had moved her. Detective Jane Lee's real identity was about to be exposed. She wasn't DEA at all. She was Dr. Sarah Chen, a genetic researcher who had worked with Rose Baker 20 years ago. They had discovered something incredible in their lab, a way to rewrite human DNA using simple pills. But when Sarah found out they were testing it on unwilling patients, she disappeared. Now she was back, wearing a fake badge, trying to stop what she had helped create. The snipers around the clinic weren't just watching, they were waiting. Each one had been given different orders. The first was told to shoot David Chen if he tried to enter the clinic. The second was aimed at Tom Baker, with orders to fire if he tried to leave. The third had the strangest orders of all: shoot anyone who walked out carrying a white doctor's coat. None of them knew they were all targeting the wrong people. Sarah White sat in her car, staring at Rose Baker through the rain. The missing diary page shook in Rose's hand. "Your daughter didn't die from the pills," Rose said softly. "She was immune. That's why we had to study her differently." Sarah's hand gripped her own gun tighter, but then Rose said something that changed everything. "She's still alive." Back in the basement, Tom found a hidden laptop inside the old wheelchair. Its screen showed surveillance footage from the past 15 years. He watched in horror as his mother conducted secret experiments in room 13 after hours, but in the corner of one video, he saw something that made his heart stop. Himself, in a hospital gown, unconscious on a table. The date stamp showed it was from just last week, but he had no memory of it. Detective Mike Wilson wasn't answering his phone. He was sitting in his car outside the clinic, looking at old photos of his wife's sister. She hadn't really died from an overdose. He had found her research notes hidden in their attic. She had discovered what the pills were really doing to people. The night she died, she had left him a message. The pills don't just change DNA. They can change memories too. In the hotel ballroom, Lisa Baker scrolled through her phone, looking at the video she'd taken of her father's speech. But in the background of one frame, she saw something strange. Her grandmother Rose was talking to a man she recognized, her high school biology teacher, Mr. Steve Baker, her uncle. They were holding up a vial of blue liquid, and Steve was crying. Suddenly, all the phones in Pine Grove buzzed at once. Every screen showed the same message. The truth about Pine Grove Clinic will be revealed in 30 minutes. Dr. Baker isn't the monster. He's the experiment. Below the message was a medical chart showing strange test results from 30 years ago. The patient's name was Tom Baker, age 5 years old. The storm had gotten worse, but nobody noticed the strange blue color of the rain falling on Pine Grove. In 30 minutes, everyone would learn the truth about the clinic, but the real experiment had already begun, falling from the sky, seeping into the ground, and changing everyone it touched. The question wasn't who was behind it all, but who would survive what was coming next. The blue rain fell harder as Tom stared at his childhood medical chart. Age 5, first treatment. Age 10, memory modification, successful. Age 15, genetic changes stable. His whole life had been an experiment. Looking closer at the wheelchair, he found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small blue vial labeled Original Strain, TIBA 1989, his initials and birth year. Jenny Kim's hands shook as she kept her gun pointed at Rita. "Where's my daughter?" she demanded. Rita's phone suddenly showed a split screen. Jenny's daughter sleeping peacefully in one half and a timer counting down from 25 minutes in the other. "She's safe," Rita said quietly, "but she's also part of the experiment, just like her mother was 30 years ago. Remember the orphanage, Jenny? Or did they make you forget that too?" Up in the air vent, Susan Wilson pieced it together. Her sister hadn't died, exposing the drug ring. She had died trying to save the children. Dozens of them, all adopted through Pine Grove's free medical clinic program over the years. Each one given vitamins that slowly changed their DNA. Susan pulled out her own childhood photo from her pocket. She had been one of them. Outside, Sarah White listened as Rose Baker explained the horrible truth. "Your daughter Amy isn't just alive," Rose said. "She's been here the whole time." Rose pointed to Rita, the receptionist, through the clinic window. "That's her. We changed her appearance, her memories, everything. The pills didn't kill her. They turned her into someone else, just like they did to me 40 years ago." Detective Jane Lee, really Dr. Sarah Chen, finally reached room 13, but she wasn't alone. David Chen followed her, holding up his phone. "I know who you are, Sarah," he said. "You're not here to stop the experiments. You're here to steal them." On his phone was an old photo of a young Sarah Chen, standing next to Rose Baker, both wearing lab coats. Between them was a small boy, Tom Baker. Mary Baker raced toward the clinic after Linda Johnson showed her one last photo. It was a class picture from Lisa's school. Every child in the photo had been a patient at the clinic, and each one had the same strange blue tint in their eyes that Lisa had developed over the past year. At the bottom of the photo was a note, Generation 2, ready for activation. In the hotel, Lisa Baker cornered her Uncle Steve in the empty ballroom. "I remember you," she said, her eyes glowing slightly blue. "Not from family dinners? From the lab? You were there when they changed us." Steve backed away, shocked. The memories they had erased from the children were coming back. The blue rain was reversing everything. Detective Mike Wilson finally understood his role. His wife's sister hadn't left him a message about memory pills. She had left him a cure. The gun in his glove compartment wasn't loaded with bullets. It was loaded with darts containing an antidote. But he only had 6 shots, and there were hundreds of changed people in Pine Grove. Tom found one more thing in the wheelchair, a small diary, but it wasn't written by Amy White. It was written by him, age 5, in crayon. "Mommy gives me blue medicine. It hurts, but she says it will make me special. The other kids at the hospital are changing too. Their eyes look like the rain." The clinic's computers all flashed red 15 minutes until exposure. But exposure wasn't what Rose Baker was worried about. The blue rain wasn't just reversing their memory blocks, it was accelerating the changes. Soon, everyone who had ever taken a pill from Pine Grove Clinic would remember everything, and their DNA would complete its transformation. In room 13, Rita, the real Amy White, began to remember who she was. Jenny's gun clattered to the floor as her own memories flooded back. Above them, Susan Wilson realized why her sister had hidden the antidote. The changed children hadn't been the experiment. They had been the cure for something much worse that was coming. Through the clinic's windows, they could all see it now. The blue rain wasn't falling from storm clouds. It was falling from 3 black helicopters circling above Pine Grove. On their sides was a familiar logo, the same one from Tom's medical school scholarship, his mother's old lab coat, and the pills they had been giving out for 20 years. The real experiment was about to begin, and Pine Grove was just phase 1. The black helicopters sprayed blue mist over Pine Grove as memories started flooding back to everyone who had ever taken pills from the clinic. At Pine Grove High School, hundreds of teenagers suddenly stopped at their evening activities, their eyes turning bright blue. In the grocery store, shoppers froze in the aisles, remembering labs and tests they weren't supposed to know about. The whole town had been an experiment. Tom ran up from the basement, clutching the blue vial from the wheelchair. His phone rang. It was a video call from Lisa. "Dad," she said, her blue eyes glowing brighter than ever. "I remember the tests. All of us kids do. But we're not angry." She turned her phone to show the school gym. Dozens of teenagers stood perfectly still, their eyes shining like blue stars. "We're evolving." Jenny, Kim, and Rita, now remembering she was really Amy White, stared at each other in room 13. "We were in the same orphanage," Jenny whispered. "Before Rose adopted you and changed your face." Amy nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "But my mom, Sarah, didn't lose me," she said. "She was trying to save me from becoming like them." Through the window, they watched as normal people caught in the blue rain began to shake and change. Sarah White broke down in her car as Rose Baker showed her more proof. Photographs of Amy growing up in secret, protected and changed to keep her safe. "The pills didn't just change DNA," Rose explained. "They prepared our bodies for something bigger. Your daughter was special. She was the first child born to a changed parent. She had the genes we needed." Detective Jane Lee, Dr. Sarah Chen, reached for the clinic's main computer in room 13. But David Chen grabbed her arm. If you shut it down, they all die, he said. The changes have to complete or their DNA will break down. On the screens around them, security cameras showed people all over town convulsing as the blue rain activated something in their genes. Mary Baker never made it to the clinic. Her car crashed when she saw Lisa walking down the street, floating several inches off the ground. All around her, changed teenagers were discovering new abilities. The pills hadn't just modified their DNA, they had unlocked hidden human potential. Linda Johnson's voice came from her car radio. Now you know why they needed so many test subjects. They were breeding a new kind of human. In his office, Steve Baker opened his locked drawer and pulled out a red vial, different from the blue ones. I didn't help create the cure, he said to himself. I helped create the final step. He loaded the red liquid into a syringe and walked toward the school gym where the changed teenagers waited. His eyes now glowed bright blue, too. Detective Mike Wilson realized his antidote darts were useless. His wife, Susan, climbed down from the air vent and showed him her childhood photos. You can't cure us, she said, her eyes starting to glow. This is what humans were always supposed to become. Your wife's sister died trying to stop evolution itself. Tom finally understood the truth in his childhood diary. His mother hadn't been running a drug ring. She had been preparing humanity for a change she knew was coming. The pills, the experiments, the secret tests, they were all to help people survive what would happen next. Through his office window, he watched as the first changed humans began to transform further. The clinic's countdown reached 5 minutes, but nobody cared about exposure anymore. A greater truth was spreading with the blue rain. Rose Baker's phone buzzed with a message from someone called Original Source. Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2. She looked up at the black helicopters and pressed a button on her phone. Across Pine Grove, every changed person heard her voice in their heads. Children of the blue rain, it's time to meet your real parents. The helicopters landed on the clinic's roof. They didn't carry government agents or drug enforcement officers. As their doors opened, bright blue light poured out, and something not quite human stepped into the rain. Tom looked down at his childhood diary one last time. The last page had a crayon drawing, strange beings with blue eyes reaching down from the sky. Below it, in a child's handwriting, the blue medicine helps us get ready. They're coming back for us soon. Pine Grove wasn't just a town anymore. It was going to be the birthplace of humanity's next step, and everyone who had taken those pills was about to learn why they had really been chosen. The beings that stepped out of the helicopters looked almost human, except for their silver skin and bright blue eyes. Tom recognized them from his childhood memories, the same ones who had visited him in the lab when he was 5. In his hand, the blue vial began to glow brightly, calling to them like a beacon. At the high school gym, Lisa and her classmates formed a perfect circle, their feet no longer touching the ground. Steve arrived with his red vial, but he was too late. The teenagers spoke in unison. We don't need the final step anymore. We are the final step. Their bodies began to emit a soft blue light that spread through the windows, reaching out to others who had taken the pills over the years. Jenny and Amy watched from room 13 as people all over town began walking toward the clinic, drawn by some invisible force. Through the security cameras, they saw familiar faces. Former patients, all moving in perfect sync, their eyes glowing brighter with each step. Look at their skin, Jenny whispered. Patches of silver were beginning to appear on those who had taken the most pills. Sarah White finally understood why she had never found Amy's body. The funeral was fake, Rose explained, showing her more files. We needed everyone to think she was dead, so they wouldn't look for her when she changed. Through the car window, they watched Amy, still looking like Rita the receptionist. As her face began to shimmer and change, slowly returning to her original appearance. Detective Jane Lee's true identity meant nothing now. Dr. Sarah Chen's research had helped start this, but even she hadn't known the full truth. David Chen showed her his own glowing eyes. We're not here to steal the research. We're here to finish it. From his pocket, he pulled out a silver device that looked like a small star, pulsing with blue energy. Mary Baker crawled from her crashed car, watching in awe as her daughter Lisa floated above the school with her classmates. The changed teenagers had linked hands, forming a glowing blue web in the sky. Each pulse of their light caused more people in town to transform. Through the blue rain, Mary saw her own hands beginning to shine. Detective Mike Wilson's antidote darts shattered in his hands, the liquid inside turning to blue mist. His wife, Susan, touched his face gently, her silver-tinted skin cool against his cheek. "This was always going to happen," she said. "Every human has this potential. The pills just woke it up early in some of us." Above them, the helicopters released more blue rain, covering every inch of Pine Grove. In Room 13's hidden server room, the countdown didn't matter anymore. The computers showed a new message. Phase 2, global distribution complete. Maps appeared, showing blue dots spreading across every continent. Pine Grove hadn't been the only test site. There were dozens of other clinics, other doctors, other changed children waiting to evolve. Tom looked at his reflection in his office window. His eyes glowed the brightest blue of all. He had been the first success. Patient zero in an experiment that had taken 30 years to complete. Behind him, the silver beings waited silently. One of them held out a hand, offering him another blue vial. "It's time to wake up the others," they said in a voice that echoed in his mind. Rose Baker watched as her life's work finally bore fruit. The real drug operation hadn't been about addiction or money. Each pill had contained a tiny piece of alien DNA, slowly preparing human bodies for this moment. She touched the silver patch growing on her arm. Soon the whole town would look like their true ancestors. The transformed teenagers descended from the sky, landing in a circle around the clinic. Lisa found her father and held out her hand. "Don't be scared, Dad," she said, but her voice had changed, carrying echoes of something ancient and powerful. "We're not becoming monsters. We're becoming what humans were always meant to be." Through the blue rain, more helicopters appeared on the horizon, but these were military, responding to panicked calls about the strange lights over Pine Grove. They had no idea they were already too late. The changed humans looked up at the approaching helicopters, their eyes glowing with power. The real question wasn't whether they could be stopped, it was whether the rest of humanity was ready to join them. The military helicopters hovered above Pine Grove, spotlights cutting through the blue rain. But when the lights touched the changed humans, something strange happened. The beams bent around them, creating rainbow-like halos in the mist. Inside the lead helicopter, the pilot's eyes suddenly began to glow blue. He had been one of Tom's patients last year. Tom watched as his mother Rose stepped forward to face the military response. She raised her hands, and suddenly every electronic device in Pine Grove went dark. Then she spoke, her voice reaching every mind in town. "For 30 years, we prepared you. The pills weren't just medicine. They were keys, unlocking the DNA your ancestors left sleeping inside you." In the school gym, Lisa and her classmates had formed a protective circle around younger children who were just beginning to change. Steve stood in the middle, the red vial forgotten in his pocket. "I was wrong to try to stop this," he said, watching silver patterns spread across his skin. "The red serum wasn't a cure. It was meant to speed up the change." The children's eyes glowed brighter, accepting him into their circle. Jenny and Amy ran down to the basement, following a strange pulling sensation. The walls were covered in flowing silver patterns now, like liquid metal. They found Sarah White already there, touching the patterns with trembling fingers. "It's a map," she whispered. Not of roads or cities, but of human DNA. Look, it shows where they changed us and what we're becoming. Detective Jane Lee. Dr. Sarah Chen finally understood her own research from 20 years ago. The device David Chen held wasn't a weapon or a tool. It was a key to unlock the final stage. Your brother didn't die from bad pills, she told him. He transformed early, didn't he? You've been changed this whole time. David nodded, his silver skin glowing. I've been watching, waiting for everyone else to catch up. Mary Baker never made it to her crashed car. Instead, she found herself floating gently above the street, drawn toward the clinic by an invisible force. All around her, Pine Grove's residents were changing. The mailman's skin turned silver as he delivered one last letter. The baker's eyes glowed blue as bread burned in his ovens. Even the pets were changing. Dogs and cats, developing strange patterns on their fur. Detective Mike Wilson remembered something his wife's sister had told him before she died. She hadn't been warning him about the pills. She'd been trying to prepare him. The antidote darts had never been meant to stop the change. They contained the pure alien DNA, meant to help those who rejected the transformation. He loaded his gun with the last dart and pointed it at his own heart. In room 13, the computers hadn't really shut down. They had transformed, screens melting into liquid silver that flowed up the walls and across the ceiling. Images formed in the metallic surface. Other towns, other clinics, other changed humans awakening around the world. Pine Grove wasn't just patient zero. It was the control center. The silver beings from the helicopter gathered around Tom, forming a circle. One of them touched his forehead, and suddenly he could see everything. 30 years of memories flooded back. The pills, the experiments, the deaths, they hadn't been mistakes or crimes. They had been necessary steps, preparing human bodies to survive the change. Those who died hadn't been strong enough to transform. His guilt transformed into understanding. Rose Baker's phone showed one last message from original source before it melted into silver liquid. Phase 3, integration. She smiled as military boots hit the ground outside. Armed soldiers surrounded the clinic but stopped in confusion as their weapons turned to liquid in their hands. Through the blue rain, more changed humans approached from every direction, their silver skin glowing like stars. Lisa and her classmates rose into the air again, but this time they pulled their unchanged parents up with them. Below, the silver beings began to sing, in a language that felt older than Earth itself. Each note changed more humans, spreading the transformation faster. The teenagers added their voices to the song, creating harmonies that made the very air shimmer. The military commander's radio crackled with orders to contain the situation. But as he raised his hand to give orders, he saw silver patterns appearing on his own skin. His daughter had been prescribed headache pills from Pine Grove Clinic last month. The change was already inside him, waiting to wake up. Tom finally understood why he had become a doctor, why he had been chosen to run the clinic. It hadn't been his choice at all. The alien DNA inside him had been guiding him for 30 years, preparing him to help transform humanity. Through the windows, he watched Pine Grove become something new. Not quite human, not quite alien, but a perfect bridge between both worlds. The real experiment wasn't over. It was just beginning. News helicopters joined the military ones, broadcasting live footage of Pine Grove's transformation. But their cameras couldn't capture what was really happening. The images showed only strange blue lights and silver mist. Reporters worldwide scrambled to explain why every TV station suddenly started playing the same strange, haunting song that the silver beings were singing. Tom stood at his clinic's entrance, no longer hiding. His transformed body glowed with blue light as he faced the military commander. "You can't fight evolution," he said, his voice carrying memories of a civilization millions of years old. "Look at your hands. The commander watched in shock as ancient symbols appeared on his skin, matching the ones on his daughter's prescription bottles from Pine Grove. Lisa and her classmates had spread out across town, each teenager leading groups of newly transformed humans. They moved in perfect sync, their silver skin reflecting the blue rain. At the grocery store, Lisa touched the frozen food section, and every screen in the building started showing the same message. Earth was never your first home. Jenny and Amy discovered something incredible in the basement's silver walls. The flowing patterns weren't just DNA maps, they were instructions. Amy placed her hand on one symbol, and suddenly, holographic images filled the air, showing Earth's true history. Humans didn't evolve from apes, Jenny whispered. We were planted here, meant to grow, until we were ready to remember. Sarah White found herself drawn to the school, where more children were changing. But these transformations were different, faster, more complete. The younger they are, the easier they change, Rose explained, following her. Their DNA hasn't forgotten as much. They watched as an entire kindergarten class develop silver skin and blue eyes within minutes, laughing as they discovered they could float. Detective Sarah Chen and David Chen worked quickly in room 13, using the silver device to activate computers worldwide. Every medical record system, every pharmacy database, every hospital network, David said. They all have pieces of the pattern hidden in their code. With each activation, more blue dots appeared on their global map. Mary Baker floated near the town hall, watching Pine Grove's mayor transform. His skin turned silver as he read emergency messages from other cities. Reports were flooding in. People everywhere who had taken pills from clinics connected to Pine Grove were changing. The transformation was spreading faster than anyone could track. Detective Mike Wilson never used his last antidote dart. Instead, his wife Susan took it and poured it into Pine Grove's water supply. Everyone deserves a chance to remember, she said. The dart's liquid turned the entire water system a slight blue color, carrying alien DNA to every home in town. The silver beings spread out through Pine Grove, each one leading groups of transformed humans like teachers with eager students. They showed them how to use their new abilities, how to communicate with thoughts, how to manipulate energy, how to read the ancient memories in their DNA. In the high school library, Steve found old yearbooks changing before his eyes. Photos of past students shifted, showing their true nature. Each generation had been slightly different, slightly more prepared. The class photos from the last 3 years showed teenagers whose eyes had already been turning blue, long before the rain started. Rose Baker's phone had completely melted now, becoming a small silver sphere that floated in front of her. It projected images of other towns, other experiments, other doctors, like Tom, who had been prepared since childhood. Pine Grove was just the first to complete the change. Dozens more communities were approaching their own transformations. Tom felt a new presence in his mind, the combined consciousness of everyone who had changed. They shared their memories, their fears, their understanding of what they were becoming. Through this connection, he learned the truth about why Earth had been seeded with human life. The universe was changing, and humanity needed to evolve to survive what was coming. The military helicopters retreated, their pilots unable to maintain formation as more of them began to transform, but they weren't running away. They were spreading the change. Blue rain fell from their rotors as they flew over other towns, carrying the activation signal further. In room 13, the final countdown reached 0. But instead of exposing a drug ring, the computers broadcast a different message to every screen on Earth. The preparation phase is complete. True human evolution begins now. The message played in every language, accompanied by the Silver Being's song. As night fell over Pine Grove, the transformed humans glowed like stars, their silver skin reflecting moonlight through the blue rain. But they weren't looking at their town anymore. Their eyes were turned toward the sky, where more lights were appearing. The silver beings hadn't come alone. The rest of their family was arriving to welcome humanity home. The night sky above Pine Grove filled with lights, not just from helicopters anymore, but from massive ships that looked like liquid silver clouds. The transformed humans felt no fear. They recognized them from memories buried deep in their DNA. Their true family had finally come to bring them home. Tom stood on the clinic's roof with his daughter Lisa, his wife Mary, and his mother Rose. Their silver skin glowed under the ship's lights as Rose finally told them the full truth. Earth was a nursery. We were sent here as simple humans, meant to grow and evolve until we were ready. The pills didn't change us. They just woke up what we really are. In the streets below, the military had completely stopped trying to fight. Soldiers watched their own hands turn silver, ancient memories flooding back as the blue rain fell. Their guns had all melted, forming pools of silver liquid that flowed toward the storm drains, spreading the transformation through the water system to other towns. And Jenny and Amy found more changed children gathering in the basement. The silver walls had turned into a kind of teaching space, showing them images of their true home, a world of crystal cities and silver clouds, where beings of light and energy lived in peace. This is why my mom tried to hide me, Amy realized. She knew I would be one of the first to remember everything. Detective Sarah Chen looked at her old research notes one last time before they dissolved into silver mist. We thought we were studying addiction, she told David Chen, but we were really documenting evolution. Every side effect was actually a sign of someone starting to wake up. David nodded, showing her the silver device's final reading. Phase 3. Global integration was now at 75% completion. The changed teenagers had spread throughout Pine Grove, helping others through their transformations. Each person who changed remembered something different, pieces of a huge puzzle that only made sense when they shared their memories. Through their connected minds, they built a picture of why they had been sent to Earth and what they needed to do next. Steve Baker watched from the school roof as his students floated between the silver ships, their bodies glowing brighter as they learned more about their true nature. The red vial in his pocket had turned blue. It had never been meant to stop anything. Like everything else in Pine Grove, it was just waiting for the right moment to transform. In room 13, now a shimmering silver chamber, Susan Wilson and her husband Mike found the truth about her sister. She hadn't died trying to expose the clinic. She had been one of the first to fully transform, and now she was up there on one of those ships, waiting to reunite with her family. Mike's antidote darts had been her way of making sure they would be ready to join her. Sarah White stood with her daughter, Amy, both of them finally wearing their true faces, their silver skin patterns matching perfectly. The years of planning revenge melted away as they remembered who they really were, not just mother and daughter, but part of something much bigger. The pharmacy records Amy had found weren't evidence of crimes. They were proof of their species slowly waking up. The silver beings gathered all the transformed humans in the town square. Through their shared consciousness, they explained everything. Earth was just one of many nursery worlds where their species could grow safely until the universe was ready for them to return. The time had come because something was happening in space, a change that only their evolved form could survive. Tom looked at his childhood diary one last time before it dissolved into silver light. His crayon drawings hadn't been imagination. They had been his first memories breaking through, showing him what they would all become. Every prescription he wrote, Every patient he treated had been guided by these ancient memories, preparing them all for this moment. The ships lowered silver bridges of light. As the transformed humans prepared to board them, they didn't feel like they were leaving home. They were finally returning to it. But Earth wouldn't be abandoned. It would become a bridge between what humanity had been and what it was becoming. Pine Grove would be remembered as the place where humans first woke up to their true nature. Lisa turned to her father before they boarded. "What about the humans who haven't changed yet?" she asked. Tom smiled, his silver skin reflecting the ship's lights. "The blue rain is still falling," he said, "and it will keep falling until everyone remembers who they really are. We're not leaving anyone behind." As the ships rose into the night sky, Pine Grove glowed like a blue star below them. Through the windows, they could see the transformation spreading across the country, each town lighting up as its people began to change. The light would keep spreading until the whole planet glowed with the truth. Humans had never been just humans. They had been cosmic seeds, planted on Earth, waiting for the right moment to bloom. And that moment had finally arrived.